November 1932. Australian soldiers set up machine guns in a wheat field. Their target, a mob of 20,000 emus. The guns opened fire, and the emus scattered, splitting into dozens of small groups and simply running in every direction. The soldiers kept firing. The emus kept moving. After 12 days, the Australian military withdrew, defeated by birds. The story begins not in a war room, but on a farm. The year is 1932, and the Campion district of Western Australia is in crisis. Wheat prices have collapsed during the Great Depression, and thousands of soldier settlers, veterans given farmland after World War I, are barely surviving. Then, in the middle of that crisis, the emus arrived. 20,000 of them, migrating inland from the coast as they did every breeding season. They descended on the wheat fields and ate everything in their path. They broke through fences, flattened crops, and left behind kilometer-wide swathes of destruction. The farmers begged the government for help, and the government, to their credit, took the request seriously. They sent the military. Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery arrived with 2 soldiers and 2 Lewis guns, the same weapons used in the trenches of World War I. The plan was straightforward: herd the emus toward dams where they gathered to drink, then open fire at close range. The military issued a press release. Journalists and a cameraman were invited along to capture what everyone assumed would be a quick, clean victory. Nobody was ready for what actually happened. On November 2nd, 1932, the first operation began. The soldiers found a mob of roughly 500 emus near a dam and waited for them to cluster close enough. Then the emus spooked, before the guns were even in position, and scattered in every direction. The guns fired anyway. Only a handful of birds were killed. They tried again at another dam. The gun jammed. Day after day, the pattern repeated. The emus detected the soldiers early, split up, and simply ran. This was the critical insight that stunned the military. The emus didn't flee as a herd. They fractured into small, independent units, almost as if they were following a military dispersal tactic. Major Meredith later noted, with grudging respect, that the emus could face machine guns with the invulnerability of Zulus. He also noted that the birds seemed to have their own commanders, larger males who kept watch from high ground while the mob fed. The newspapers, rather than celebrating a military triumph, began printing headlines that mocked the entire operation. After 12 days of operations, Major Meredith's men had fired nearly 2,500 rounds of ammunition. Confirmed kills, fewer than 50 emus. The operation was suspended. Members of Parliament were furious. One politician suggested that medals should be given to the emus, but the farmers were still desperate, and the emus were still there. The military came back. In late November 1932, a second operation was launched, this time with a different strategy. Rather than setting up fixed gun positions, Major Meredith mounted the guns on trucks and chased the emus across open ground. The outback had other ideas. The trucks were constantly bogged in dry creek beds, shredded by scrub, and broken by the brutal terrain. And the emus, those supposedly simple-minded birds, were demonstrating something remarkable. Emus can sustain multiple gunshot wounds and keep running. Their bodies, evolved over millions of years in one of the harshest environments on Earth, are dense, tough, and built for endurance. A single emu requires multiple rounds to stop, and with the birds scattering into groups of 3 and 4, each burst of fire had almost no effect on the overall population. The ornithologist Dominic Cerventi would later describe the emu as an animal with a remarkable ability to absorb punishment, a creature essentially designed to survive. By December 10, 1932, just over 5 weeks after the whole campaign began, the military withdrew for the second and final time. In total, the soldiers had fired approximately 9,160 rounds of ammunition over both operations. Estimated emus killed, approximately 986, with perhaps 2,500 more wounded. The emu population, essentially undented. When the ornithologist J.R. Long was asked whether the emus had won, he didn't hesitate. If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world. 3 more requests for military intervention against emus were made in the years that followed: 1934, 1943, and 1948. Every single one was refused. The Great Emu War is remembered today as one of history's most peculiar military failures. It was reported in newspapers as far away as the United Kingdom and the United States, often barely disguising their laughter. But beneath the absurdity, the farmers of Campion were real people facing real ruin. The emus were not strategists, not warriors, not symbols. They were simply animals doing what animals do, surviving. And yet, against machine guns, military strategy, and human certainty, surviving was enough to win. Australia would eventually solve its emu problem the way it should have from the beginning, not with guns, but with fences. The emus are still there. They never left.